If we put all the alternate versions of Spider-Man villains together on a team, would we call them the menacing multiversal million? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. We are back to talk alternate versions of Spider-Man villains in this part 2. Join me and let's get into it. Number 10. Ducktor Doom. I love Ducktor Doom. He just looks so cute. But of course, this is still a Ducktor Doom alternate, so I imagine they're still quite menacing. Ducktor Doom is just what he sounds like, an anthropomorphic duck who also happens to have a similar appearance and attitude to Ducktor Doom of Earth 616. He makes an appearance as an adversary in the first issue of Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. Being a cartoon version of Ducktor Doom, aka Victor Von Doom, Ducktor Doom also hails from the reality of Spider-Hams, Earth 8311. We also learn in his first appearance that against his own will or his own interests, Ducktor Doom happens to be a well-liked rock star, becoming famous against his wishes. He was trying to create his own rock group and make money off of them, but instead he ended up in the limelight despite his protests. Number 9. Killer Kravinoffs. The Killer Kravinoffs are the grandchildren of Kraven the Hunter from the dystopian post-apocalyptic reality of Old Man Logan and Old Man Hawkeye, Earth 807128. With Kraven no longer around to hunt, in his place are his grandchildren. There are 3 of them, but only one ends up actually getting a name. Sadly, their existence in the comics is short-lived for how cool they look and should be as descendants of Kraven. They only appear in one issue of Old Man Hawkeye, showing up in issue number 4. They run into Marshall Bullseye there and actually end up getting killed by him. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more alternate villains, there are so many alternate Spider-Man villains I could tell you about, so be sure to hit that like button. Number 8. Karn. Karn ends up becoming the Great Weaver, an ally to the Spider Totems in the end. Spider Totems are spider-like superpowered beings who actually receive their powers through fate rather than circumstance, as we were initially led to believe with heroes like Spider-Man. Karn was a member of the Inheritors, a coven of energy vampires who feed on various animal kingdom totems such as the spider variety, Spider Totems. After Karn was blamed for the death of his mother, he was made to work to atone his misdeeds. He traveled around various multiverses hunting down spider totems at the behest of the other Inheritors, though he never really enjoyed it and thus was a reluctant villain. When the previous Master Weaver ended up dead, Karn decided to take his place and instead became an ally to the Spider Army as opposed to a villain of theirs. He did however kill spider totems back when he was hunting and working for the Inheritors, and a member of the Inheritors really. Like his fellow Inheritors, Karn hails from the reality of Earth 001 and Loom World, which is their home world. Number 7. Kingpig. Kingpig is Spider-Ham's version of Kingpin. As such, Kingpig hails from the same reality of Earth 8311. He is, as you guessed it, one big mean pig, who also happens to be a major crime lord, like his 616 counterpart. However, while Kingpin in the comics is more into drug rings and other organized crime, Kingpig is into smuggling cheese and running the cheese market. Now I want cheese. Kingpig operated in secret, and despite the police trying to uncover who was behind the crimes in their town of Hakawatami, Wisconsin, Kingpig managed to be too sneaky for them to catch. In the end, it was up to Spider-Ham to discover just who was behind all this illegal activity. We already had Kingpin show up as the villain in Into the Spider-Verse, so how funny and great would it be to see his Toon counterpart in Across the Spider-Verse? Also, I'd really like to go to Spider-Ham's reality, if we get a reality hop, which I think we're gonna get to do that. Number 6. Goblin. In the noir verse of Earth 90214, Green Goblin's counterpart is simply known as Goblin. Here, Norman Osborn is still a ruthless villain who is the major crime boss in New York and leads his own villainous group known as the Enforcers. The Enforcers are made up of former carnival freaks who each have their own unique talents, featuring characters like the noir verse's Vulture and Chameleon. Goblin turned to a life of crime because he was mistreated, himself being a circus freak who was ridiculed for his scaly, green, reptile-like skin. Goblin in the comics is the one who is ultimately responsible for the death of Peter Parker's Uncle Ben and for the death of Ben Urich, the reporter and Felicia Hardy's former lover in this reality. Number 5. Patton Parnel. Patton Parnel has to be one of my favorite of the evil alternate Spider-Men out there, and I think he would make a bomb villain in Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, especially if we get some kind of League of Evil Spider-Men. Patton Parnel is the alternate Spider-Man from Earth 51412. Like the Spider, who is on part 1 of our list, Parnel also has some sociopathic tendencies and enjoys recreational activities like burning ants with a magnifying glass. He ends up becoming a Spider-Man in a more literal sense, becoming a spider-like monstrosity who is also capable of laying eggs, as his Uncle Ted, who also appears to mistreat young Patton, finds out. Rather than Patton Parnel having an origin story of fantasy and heroism, his origin is basically more like a horror story, where Patton ends up as a murderous, monstrous, spider-like villain who develops a taste for human flesh and terrorizes his next-door neighbor and crush, Sarah Jane. Number 4. Tyler Stone. We talked about Alchemax, the villainous future corporation, on the part 1 to our list, and even an alternate video game reality where Peter ends up as the man behind that corporation, but we have yet to focus on the vice president of Alchemax's R&D department in the main 2099 reality of Earth 928, Tyler Stone. Tyler Stone is not only VP of Research and Development at Alchemax, but also is secretly Miguel O'Hara's biological father. Tyler Stone had an affair with the wife of one of his employees, Conchata, who is Miguel's mother. Miguel doesn't learn until later on that he is the son of Stone, and ends up on the staff of Alchemax, working as a brilliant geneticist for them. When he tries to leave, however, it is Stone who slips him the highly addictive drug only made by Alchemax known as Rapture, to prevent him from leaving. Fortunately, Miguel manages to free himself via experimentation, which also gives him spider-like powers and abilities, becoming Spider-Man 2099. Number 3. Spider-Carnage. Similar to the Spider on part 1 of our list, Spider-Carnage is another evil alternate version of Peter Parker, or at least he thinks he's Peter Parker. Spider-Carnage came into being following Miles Warren cloning Peter. In this reality, Peter lost his Uncle Ben and later also his Aunt May, which left him completely brokenhearted. His state of mind was only made worse when he was made to believe the version who had escaped Miles dyeing his hair blonde and taking up the name Ben Reilly might actually be the true Peter Parker, with Peter potentially being the clone. This revelation filled Peter with hatred for Ben, and would later fuel the bond he had with the Carnage symbiote, who entered his world via an interdimensional portal during a time when Peter fought Ben. His rage and the symbiote turned him into a villain known as Spider-Carnage, and his plan was to destroy all realities across the multiverse. This version of Spider-Carnage appeared in the 90s animated Spider-Man television series. Number 2. Red Goblin. Red Goblin isn't necessarily an alternate variant considering he is the main reality 616 Norman Osborn, but Superior Spider-Man is also technically Earth 616's Otto Octavius, and I counted him last time without much complaint, so I figured we could put Red Goblin on this list and it should be fine. Red Goblin is a villain that comes from a period in Marvel Comics where a depowered Norman Osborn ended up getting his hands on the Carnage symbiote and convincing it to bond with him, with both of them bonding over how they enjoyed hurting and tormenting people. Yikes. The Carnage symbiote also helped to cure Norman Osborn of the antidote that was blocking him from using the Goblin serum to regain his previous power set. So this version comes with both the powers of Carnage and those of Green Goblin. Plus you get the brilliant and twisted minds of Norman and Carnage combined. Who doesn't want Red Goblin? He's such a cool villain. Put him in Across the Spiderverse! Number 1. Evil Spider-Man Army. With the potential for characters like Patton Parnel, Spider-Carnage, Earth 65's Lizard, Ultimatum, Superior Spider-Man, The Spider, and Peter Parker 2099 to show up, it seems plausible that we could get a whole Evil Spider-Man Army, or Evil Spider Army, in Across the Spider-Verse. I don't know about you, but I'd love to see some Evil Spider-Men team up to take on the heroic Spider-Folks we've come to know and love from the previous film and beyond in the comics. I think that would be super cool. The reality is, in the multiverse, we don't even need an external threat. The threat could simply be Spider-Man himself, considering there are so many great evil possibilities that appear throughout the catalog of Marvel's multiversal realities. Who are your favorite alternate Spider-Man villains? What kind of cool team-up names can you come up with for a multiversal Spidey villain group? Which Spider-Man villain do you think needs more alternates, or maybe needs less? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight. Till next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Ultimately responsible for the death of Ben Urich, the reporter and Felicia Hardy's former lover in this reality, and Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. Wait, let me say that again, because I just made it sound like Ben Urich is also Peter Parker's Uncle Ben, which is not what's happening.